if you look at some of my posts, like, I make the mistake of not reading who that post was made from. How do you say, like, the super liberals of America, and like,
Yeah.
I censor. I like
The
go
Young
back and I'm
Turks,
like,
they're called, yes. All right, so this is the first year actually at Louder with Crowder. We've wanted to do this a few times where we've broadcast Change My Mind segments, and we've had people come on. Sometimes they've been very civil, sometimes they've been very hostile. And this next guest actually was on the most recent Change My Mind. It got, I think, something like 2.5 million plays, 3 million plays, somewhere around that. And there was a very passionate response. And then she did actually reach out to me on Twitter to talk about her experience with Change My Mind. And I asked her subsequently, I said, hey, would you be willing to come on the show? And even though we disagreed on some fundamental issues, namely this was a pro-life segment, she's here. Thank you so much for being back, Yara. How are you?
pretty good. It's been a really whirlwind of an experience, I guess you could say.
Well, I want to get to that in a second. First off, I did want to thank you because I found out after the fact that when we were running this Change My Mind, we'd prepared it and it was uploaded, that you had reached out to some people, I guess, through the website who, it wasn't me, but I heard after the fact that you asked us if we could either remove it or, I don't know if it was blur your face. And at that point, it was too late. And I will tell you this, we've had those requests before. We don't usually acquiesce because then we'd never have any content out there. But once the video went up, you didn't pull it down. And people have done that in the past where we've had to re-upload the video and fight through the YouTube system. So I appreciate that. I know this was probably a bigger platform than you had anticipated, but I appreciate you not using the powers of censorship that be to just get it removed.
Yeah. Essentially, when I first sent those videos, I guess what really was, or not the video, I'm sorry, the email contacting your team about it was because I guess I was more in fear of maybe some of the ramifications that might occur in my life because I let myself get personal, and I usually don't do that. I really try not to, and I guess it just rung such a strong chord with me. My emotions kind of came over me. And I, at first I saw it as like, oh my God, like everyone knows. Crap.
Yeah.
What is everyone going to think? And then came to light some of the issues that I've dealt with, which is depression and anxiety and mental health. Because, putting yourself in the spotlight, especially, it's jarring in a sense.
It is very jarring. And I think that you did get personal, but I think you handled yourself very well. And again, this is not even to speak of our disagreements. I think that's why people had a very passionate response. And I know you said it's been a whirlwind. What would you say the overall response has been? Because I've tried to direct my fans, my followers, to be respectful, and I've seen that, in my experience, from my point of view, be the majority of it. Has that been the case?
It really depends on what platform you're looking or what social media you're looking at, because when I contacted you, I made a Twitter. I'd never really had a Twitter, so I was like, okay, well, maybe if I just kind of get ahead of it and say my small little piece that I can and the little amount of words that Twitter allows you, maybe it'll kind of help me a little, I guess. And Twitter was very positive. I had a couple sour apples, nobody that I can't handle, something that I expected. However, I did feel more judgment on, I guess, YouTube and Facebook.
Sure.
I can understand people don't agree with what I did and some of the points that I did bring up, and having done more research, the conversation itself actually did impact my perspective of the entire conversation. And that's
how
what
so?
these are. Well, in a sense, I gathered that what people had assumed of me was that I did not regret my decision, that I was using it as contraceptive, and that I was this bad person overall because I was wrong in my form of justification. However, oh my God, I just went blank.
Oh, you just went blank? Oh, sorry. I thought
Yeah.
you meant the video went blank. In which case, not such a bad thing if you
No,
can't see me.
I-
No, believe me, this happens. This is my worst fear, and it happens to me all the time. Where I just have mental band-aids, where I go another direction. And as a comedian, I have the luxury of just going a completely disconnected direction. But did you find your spot there now?
Oh, what were we talking about again?
We were talking about how it changed your perspective. That you said some people thought you were a bad
Yeah.
person, and yes,
Yes, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
no
But yeah,
apologies necessary.
so it made me realize that yes, I do regret the decision. It's, personally, I didn't get to say this. It's not something I would do again. I didn't get the chance to say that I felt as though I squandered my opportunity in what you would call motherhood, and you know, uh, I had felt justified in what I had done, but having the conversation kind of made me question my motives. Question, did I actually, take advantage of all the opportunities that were available? But it even also made me want to ask myself, you know, why? Like, why other women feel the way that I feel as well,
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are those external forces that guided my decision, and how many people feel that same way? So,
Wow.
you know, yeah, I agree. It's not very moral, at all. It's very hard. Um,
Would you are you surprised at all? This is very surprising to me to hear you say this, and I really do appreciate it. And let me say this. This is kind of the purpose of the whole change my mind segment. It started with me saying, "Gosh, I kept getting these requests to do cable news and Sky and all this stuff, and I would do it every now and then, and it's kind of you go there and people have their talking points, or you have one really good argument and it goes viral. But I said, the kinds of conversations that we have around the fireplace or at the bar, at the pub, or at the cigar lounge. These are the kinds of conversations that I really would love to have on air, but of course we've been told no one wants to watch that. And so the approach is not one designed to be caustic, but designed to get people to rationalize their own positions and see why they believe what they believe. And so what you're sort of explaining here is the intended goal of the segment, but we often don't get to follow up with people, and so it goes out kind of into the ether, and we hope that it works.
yeah. Well, at least it does work. And I hope other women who have been in my position, I just want you to know, don't question your self-worth, because we're all human. I'm still young. I'm still learning. And what we do is we ask those important questions, and the people who are answering those questions, remember not to get heated, because if this was your own daughter, you can try and raise them the way that you would want them to live, but you can't speak for their actions, and you don't know what mistakes they're going to make. But at the end of the day, my mom said something important. She said she's still going to love me.
Yeah.
And she's still going to love me no matter what anybody says, or what I've done. And that actually was a step up, because I had never even disclosed this to anybody besides my closest friends. And there's only a very handful. And I had conversations before with people, but I did remove my comments because I felt as though I was getting more, personal. And why should I feel that way? Why should I feel as though I have to censor myself for you to spare the argument and to help you have that validation, because you need my perspective for
Right.
your point. And
I think your perspective here, sort of your looking back, your retroactive perspective, is also helpful. Because you said, listen, I think people maybe didn't realize that I'm not necessarily happy with the decision, or you just, I want to make sure I don't misconstrue what you've said here. You just used the word mistake. Does that mean that you feel as though maybe some of your decisions, if you could go back, you would consider them mistakes, or you would redo them if you could?
in the sense, I don't like to think of it as, if I could go back, I would change what I did,
Okay.
because you know, that's something that is a little more detrimental, especially when you're dealing with depression, because a lot of times you're questioning your self-worth, you're questioning what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to accept it and to guide it as acceptance, it's not necessarily you need to go back. Like, you can say you regret it. Yes, you can say it's a mistake. But I can't say that I would go back and change it because it happened.
Right. That's a healthy perspective. I will
Yeah.
say, you said you feel as though you've squandered your opportunity or chance for motherhood. Let me tell you, that's not the case. And that I would say, I'm not a doctor here, but I would say that's false guilt. You have a whole life ahead of you, and you seem like someone who wants to do the right thing. Seem like someone who has a level head in their shoulders. And listen, depression, anxiety, notwithstanding, I've struggled with this myself. I've talked about it. You certainly will have that opportunity many times over in your life. So I would hate for you to feel that way about it, or in any way for me to have made you feel that way about it, because that's not my intent.
No, I think squandered was kind of like, in the way that I was using it, was just kind of saying like I had a chance
Mm-hmm.
and I'll have more chances, but I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life. And hopefully it can guide me to make better decisions later on. But um, I also want, other women to realize, if you are in this position and you're making this decision, um, every everybody has their own their own circumstances
Right.
that they're living by.
Can I ask you something? Because you mentioned that, was maybe going forward, you were, you used the word regret, or you said you weren't necessarily happy with the decision, but obviously we don't want to wallow in kind of regret and, like you said, past mistakes. But moving forward,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Would you say, or would it be fair to state that at the time that you made that decision, maybe there weren't a lot of people sort of providing this opposing perspective like we did on the Change My Mind segment, where if you were to tell other young women today that maybe it's a decision that has more severe ramifications than they know going into it, and it should be considered more carefully?
Well, whenever it comes to, these women making this decision, um, I mean, I had some conversations with people, and I think what initially like did not encourage me to want to reach out to, even my mom or even family, is because I know that they're conservative, and I was concerned with their judgment. And I think women today, um, they're under this, pressure of, trying to obtain, I guess, perfection and, like, or seeming perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt as though, like, oh, well, I don't want anybody to ridicule me. And I guess it was that fear of being ridiculed,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of led me to not want to seek those options, or like those kinds of discussions. Because, the one person that I respect, in this, not, I respect a lot of people, but the person whose judgment matters most to me is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the fear of disappointing her. And then afterwards, I realized it was still the fear of disappointing her by her knowing about it.
Yeah.
And then it turns out she's not disappointed. If anything, she feels guilt, because she felt as though she did not communicate successfully that I had that support system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to sit down with your daughters, and you need to tell them, like, look, I understand you're at this age and you're going to start doing these things, but you also need to realize that no matter what happens, you have a support system.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's kind of really conversations that we didn't have. Like, we
Yeah.
never thought that was going to be an issue for us.
Well, I think that's
You
a
don't.
good point. And I've talked about this in the show. I think where a lot of Christian conservatives miss the boat a little bit is assuming that their kids aren't going to make mistakes. And so they don't necessarily have, I forgive the term here, but a plan B, in other words, to discuss with their kids, listen, if you do make a mistake, we are here. And not that this is necessarily a mistake, meaning, you know, a child is not a mistake, but I'm saying, let's say they assume that their kids aren't necessarily sexually active and, or they're being responsible. Not all kids are all the time.
Trying to be an adult when they're definitely not.
Right, exactly. And let me ask you this.
One of the biggest mistakes we all make.
Yes. I appreciate you saying that, because we have a lot of college students who approach the Change My Mind table who do not think that way. They think, oh, I'm going to school this guy and let him know how the real world works because they've done 2 years of philosophy. And it doesn't necessarily turn out that way. Let me ask you to go back to that. Do you think that if your mother or your family would have communicated more so to you, you know, the other options when you were pregnant, that there was a strong support structure and they would be there for you no matter what? Or do you think that at least if you understood that to be the case, that maybe you would have made a different, chosen a different path?
I think it would have impacted it.
Yeah.
It would have allowed me to think a little bit harder. I kind of just like went in thinking that I was alone and thinking that, okay, well, as a single mother, what am I going to do? How am I going to get a job? You know,
Right.
And, you know, it's literally like putting a pause on your life. And, you know,
Sure, it's a big deal.
it's not like getting dumped and like, oh, there's no hope. No, it's not the case. It's considering like, can I provide the quality of life to this child, the quality that I believe it deserves? And, you know, at the time I was not confident in myself in doing that. So
And you didn't, like I said, you didn't believe you had a support structure in place. And this is a huge problem that I have with places like Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics. And we don't need to get into your personal story, but I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that they did not go out of their way to show you the support systems that are out there and the services that exist should you want to have this child be a mother or put the child up for adoption. You know, there are a lot of crisis pregnancy centers, a lot of non-abortive centers that they do provide that. They do direct people toward nannying services. They do help with placing single mothers in job scenarios or actually helping them complete education. Planned Parenthood and a lot of these abortion clinics are actually precluded from doing that. And recently when we did a video in Colorado, they actually were passing out pamphlets saying there are these people who are frauds who say they want to help you with your reproductive options, but they just don't want you to get an abortion. And I'm going, well, hold on a second. If they are offering support with the other it may not be the option that you agree with, but it seems to me that it would behoove women to really know of all the options available and all the support that is there for them to not feel, it sounds like you felt a little bit trapped kind of in this decision you had to make.
Not necessarily trapped, because I can say I went in it, you know, under the circumstances and from what I had believed and the justifications that I was under at the time. You know, I went in there fully confident knowing this is what I wanted to do. And even throughout, I was shaken. I was alone. I was really in turmoil, but you do have a point. The other options were not, it was more in passing.
Yeah.
You could say they were available. It was there. You talked to someone beforehand, but you know, I think you need.
They're not equipped to offer you with those options. They're not. And we've talked about that.
I don't think they're professionally trained
No.
to the level that we should be paying attention to. Because, you know, like I said, I cannot definitively speak for anyone. So I still believe it is a choice, but I do not believe that it is, you know, moral. I don't think that, like, I think it should be something very well thought through.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because these people are trained in upselling you to the abortion because that's their main profit driver at these clinics. For example, at Planned Parenthood, they are trained in presenting you with the option of abortion. They are qualified to direct you toward abortion. They are not trained nor qualified to direct you toward other options. And that's what I find so disconcerting, that they often can make women feel trapped by going, yeah, well, here's abortion. This is what it'll be. This is what the procedure is like. This is what the post-op is like. And if you want to have the baby, you know, you want to put up for adoption, here's a pamphlet at the front door. And that's not really empowering women. And I have a wife who's worked at these centers quite a bit. We just did a video with Abby Johnson, who was a worker at Planned Parenthood, and they've talked about how a lot of not only the women but the workers feel trapped. You said kind of, this is interesting to me, you said your justifications that you believed at the time, and they've changed a little bit. Have they changed because of our conversation at Change My Mind? Or have they changed? If they have changed, how have they changed at all?
It's, in the sense, it's changed towards somewhat more understanding whenever we were talking about the socioeconomic levels or those external pressures that exist. But in the sense of changing the justification, I don't feel as though I was 100% justified. I feel as though, you know, I should have put some more consideration into it. I think, you know, that I myself am going to continue to grow on this, but it's less solid than it was when I first thought about it when I was talking to you. So you did uneven the ground a little bit,
Well, my goal was not to cause a tectonic shift or an earthquake at all. It's just to make sure that
I'm not conformed or like
no, and I don't expect to. You know, you don't do that.
Yeah, but it's healthy. It's healthy to challenge me and my perspectives because I'm not right. I'm 23 years old. I know way less than someone who's been on this earth for even 30, 40, 50, and so on. You know so much more than me. You have so much more life experience. And I think that's why people my age, we should be willing to have these top conversations, not only with each other, but with the older generations. And I think vice versa.
I wouldn't place myself in older generations, but I see you would. We could have been in school at the same time. No, I agree with you. And I find it interesting that you say that because here's the thing. I don't get this from life experience. I think that these segments come from simply examining the why. You know, we talk about the Socratic Method quite a bit, which, by the way, have you, this is not a trick question, have you been taught the Socratic Method in college at all?
Oh, honey, I can barely remember what I ate for lunch yesterday.
Right. Well, a lot of kids...
I've been so burned out.
A lot of kids don't. They're never taught the Socratic Method, which is just it's just the method, it's the approach of rationalizing your position and examining, okay, why do I believe this? What is the justification for this belief? And that's been replaced with identity politics in a lot of ways. I think a lot of this information comes from, and I learn with the audience, and I learn with you when we sit down and talk, because you can tell the audience, nothing up my sleeve. I had no idea as to what you were going to say, no idea what your position was going to be.
Didn't even talk about it. I was just like, well, I'm just going to go.
I appreciate your boldness, but do you think that the fact that this is so novel, the whole Change My Mind on college campus, do you think that's indicative of dialogue being shut down before something like this can take place? Because what we did is what should be happening in every single classroom, every hour of the day on college campus. And it doesn't seem like that's the case.
A lot of times, I mean, whenever you're in a college course, a lot of times I feel like unless you're really interested in that topic, people are not paying attention. And it also depends on the professor. I mean, the Socratic Method, what you brought up, that's actually something I have been using. I just wasn't really sure what the definition was for a second, but because I am minoring in anthropology, I've taken sociology, psychology. Okay. Those are some of the most phenomenal classes you can take if taught by a phenomenal professor.
Otherwise, they're complete crap. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak for everyone, but I know that in the classes that I've taken, man, they will really make you question a lot of, your ideas. And I will say that, oh my gosh, sorry. It was asking me to download something. Okay. So
it's probably a virus. I'd never accept downloading unless you know exactly what it is, but continue.
Yeah. But I will say, I've had those professors that will, are very enlightening because they're willing to have these kinds of conversations. And I've witnessed certain ideas being challenged, either on the progressive or more conservative side. It doesn't matter, and that's without any bias either.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing is the lack of bias whenever you're trying to teach your students how to communicate and validate their ideas, is that there is a lack of bias. Like, there needs to be a lack of bias.
I don't know that I agree. I think it just needs to be in genuine search of the truth. For example, I mean, I'm biased. I'm very open about it. You know, when you sat down, I would like to think that it's a positive example of how we didn't really find common ground, but we can still be civil. A lot of times people go, oh, most people we need to come to the middle. I go, well, no, a second. There's right and there's wrong. And sometimes the right thing to do is not in the middle. That's my view. And that's my view on abortion. And I felt as though I was pretty firm in expressing my views without being a dick.
It surprised me. I'm serious. Congratulations. Like, you have really changed my mind when it comes to how, some people can be when it comes to these kind of topics.
You assumed I was going to be a dick? Is that what I hear?
Yeah, a little bit. But
Why?
I mean, it's no offense. It's just the kind of same way that people assume that I'm a hardcore liberal and I just want everything. Like, I don't even know. Whatever these crazy ideas kind of get. We catch ourselves putting somebody in a certain stigma.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we shouldn't do. I don't think we should preconceive the characteristics of somebody just because they place themselves with a specific group.
Right.
You know, just because you're conservative doesn't mean that you're like this far right Nazi jerk who's trying to eliminate all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I would say those are leftists because they were socialists, the Nazis, but that gets us to another philosophy. I mean, it's in the name socialists, so, you know, I wouldn't put them amongst the right wing.
Like
right.
The words that a lot of liberal media does like to use,
Sure.
a lot of also conservative on both ends. I don't think.
Well, I've been accused of that with this so that's actually something I wanted to. Okay, this is kind of a lightning round, and then we'll get right back to the conversation. But first off, did I edit you out of context in any way?
No. Okay. You didn't edit the video at all.
Right. Well, I mean, that's one thing. We changed shots because of me talking and you talking. So people go, look, it's edited. I'm like, well, yeah, but because we want to see her face and we want to see my face when we're talking. Yeah. But okay, so we didn't edit you out of context. Everything
that I said was there.
Yes, and you were there for a good portion of that day. I mean, you saw most of these conversations were pretty similar outside of some of the screaming protesters. There were a couple of those.
A couple of the guys, and I think that's why I wanted to approach you, was because I felt like it wasn't being properly represented. You weren't getting the real side of the story, you know? And I think that's kind of what encouraged me to come and talk to you, because I was like, some of these things that these guys are saying doesn't really make sense, you know, considering, like, comparing a child to a parasite. Like, that's
right.
not the case.
Well, and I ask you this because we've been accused of selectively editing people and changed my mind, or we've been accused of misleading people. And the reason we picked yours was because, A, you were personal. And again, I want to see what your opinion is on this so that people watching can kind of understand what happens behind the scenes. The reason we picked yours first to run was because I thought it was an authentic position where neither one of us mischaracterized each other. There were some people who sat down and just said, no, listen, man, you're not going to have anything that's valid because you're not a vegan. And I was going, well, you know what? This isn't something to run because it's not going to be productive. The reason we picked yours was because, frankly, of this kind of follow-up. It was something that I thought was productive, and I thought there was a lot to take from it. So it seems to me as though, okay, you would agree, you weren't necessarily taken out of context. And what would you say to people who say, because I've been banned from some campuses, that I am a right-wing Nazi extremist who simply shows up and before the cameras roll, insult people, looking to stir up a fight and then let them roll?
Yeah, I think that's very absurd, because you were very, like, in and out. Like, you really didn't give people time the time to harass you. And I think that's something that's very good, because you take what people say with a grain of salt. And, like, I think people shouldn't ban these conversations, but they also shouldn't allow themselves to get over emotional. You can get emotional.
True. Because
that emotion is linked to your passion. Right. And then you must explain that emotion as well as that passion. But you can't dismiss another voice, because if you have as just much freedom to speak to that person, then you must allow that person the same freedom to speak to you. One of the rules that I've always lived by is treat others the way you want to be treated. I remember that from kindergarten, pre-K. That was literally the words written on the walls everywhere. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And I feel like I live by that.
I do think you did, even though we disagree on like I said, on some of the issues. I do think that you were very respectful, and even after you left and it got pretty personal, intensely personal, you were very respectful. And I was very glad to hear from you again that you were willing to come on the show, because we have had people get really heated, and we've had people try to take some swats, and we've had people who've definitely tried to ban us. And so I do understand that it's a luxury to not be banned in this culture on college campus. And we do have to be careful and get in, get out, keep our head down. And then sometimes people go, I wish I would have known you were there. We would have showed up. It's, well, that's kind of the whole point, because if you know in advance, then people start getting their torches and pitchforks ready.
You blindsided me. Let me tell you, I was just going to class. I was a lecture like any other day. I almost didn't go to class that day.
What? Well, I wouldn't admit that on air, because your professor now is watching going, and that's an F.
We just won't say which class.
Okay, that's fair.
But, you know, it's honoring to have an opportunity like this, to speak with someone like you, because like I said before, from the bottom of my heart, honestly, I'd never watched any of your videos. I didn't even know who you were. I called my brother.
My mother still thinks that I just fool around in a podcast. Yeah.
I called my brother and I was like, hey, do you know who Steven Crowder is? Like, I just talked to him and he flipped. He was like, what? And I was like, what do you mean? And so he explained it, showed me, sent me your videos. I was like, oh, what have I done? Like, because, you know, at first you're just like, oh my God, my mom is going to see this. Right. So, and you know, it was hard to watch the video.
Oh, believe I don't watch them. I don't watch them because I can't watch myself either. So it's hard to watch yourself on camera, period. Don't worry about that. That's normal.
Well, and like, you know, personally, I have certain things that I'm insecure about, like my appearances, and, you know, I finally broke down and watched the video and I was like, man, I could have made some better points, or I could have communicated that a lot better. But see, if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have been able to learn from it. And I think that's what's necessary. People shouldn't be banning you.
Well, I think
just because they disagree.
Right. I don't think people should be banning speakers who are actually far more caustic than myself, as long as there's no incitement to violence. And the goal with this, it's kind of, this is me just speaking kind of on a personal level. It's kind of a struggle, because people think, well, you show up and you don't let people know who you are, and you're a dick because you're sandbagging. But then if I show up and go, don't you know who I am? You know, so we just actually set up.
You seem like you're boasting.
Right, exactly. And so that's why I also try to never appeal to the audience, which I did one time, and I remember because the audience was really cheering and it was really loud, and I said, you know what, I never want to do that again. That's why even if people who agree with me shout somebody down, I say, I don't want to do that. This is really just designed to be a conversation between two people. Yeah. Something that you said that was interesting, though, I'd like to go back to. You said these sort of ill-conceived notions, I guess, that you're a far left leaning sort of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess, how would you describe your sort of political, social worldview?
Honestly, the way that I view politics is whoever closely aligns with the policies that I want to see enacted, that's who I vote for. I don't just vote, you know, Democratic or Republican. I actually vote mixed. I'm very centered. I've never proclaimed a political party to be my own. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you look at some of my posts, like, you know, I make the mistake of not reading who that post was made from, and it'll be like the super art, like, how do you say, like the super liberals of America, and like, yeah, I censor.
The Young Turks, like, they're called, yes.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's the name. Sorry, continue.
That was really funny. But yeah, like I'll go back and I'll remove a post, like a post that if I feel like that page doesn't really align. You know, if I don't catch it all the time, sometimes I'm
Sure.
just sharing just because I support the video. But really, in my political views, I'm really pro. How do you say? I'm pro making
America great again.
place livable, I guess, a livable country, just something that we can all say that we're proud of, to help our community members, help those who are in need, as in, like, if you're having a really bad day and someone just like holds the door open, or you're trying to get gas and you're counting pennies and someone pays for your gas ahead of you.
Sure.
I mean, it's happened before, but let me tell you, man, those are the best moments.
Yeah.
And I think just living kind of by those rules of just, you know, being kind and respectful to others.
It sounds to me like
really
you're talking about personal responsibility and personally doing the right thing versus, you know, most kids on college campus who believe it's the government's job to be the arbiter of all things sort of good.
The people are the ones who decide who's in government, and the people who are in government represent us. And I think if we focus on trying to be real politicians, oh man, I just not very the biggest fan of politicians generally, just because it's hard to find that real person.
Yeah, it's hard to find ones who don't suck. Yeah. And that's how you kind of end up with, you know, the Donald Trumps and the Cortezes of the world where, listen, most people go like, yeah, I think Donald Trump says some things that are ridiculous sometimes. Like he clearly said Tim Apple. He didn't say Tim Cook. I don't know why he would lie about that. But you know what? I like that he pisses off these people who are crazy more than the other candidates, so I like him. And then Cortez, people can look at her and go, I mean, she's barely walking upright. Her statements are completely unintelligible. But we like now that she pisses off the Donald Trump crowd, and it seems like that's what a lot of people are voting for. I do identify as conservative. I'm fine with that generalization because it does encompass most of my views.
A majority of your views, correct?
Yes, it absolutely does. Yeah, and I think it's a cop-out when a lot of people say, I'm not saying that you're copping out here, but a lot of people who clearly are conservative or who clearly are liberal go, I don't like labels. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Do you support socialized healthcare? Yes. Do you support free college for all? Yes. Do you support abortion up until birth and potentially afterward? Yes. Do you support a higher marginal tax rate? Yes. You're a socialist. You're a liberal. Just say so. And then if I say, listen, are you pro-life? Yes. Okay. Are you pro fair tax, flat tax? Yes. Are you pro limited constitutional government? Yes. You're a conservative. No, I don't like labels. I think labels are necessary. And that just like the Constitution, where it is, James Madison talked about this, it is necessary to then explain the context of this writing, for example, to bear arms, the general welfare clause. It's perfectly natural to say, I'm conservative or I tend to be liberal, but I believe A, B, and C. And on college campus, would you say that a lot of kids are afraid to just say, I'm conservative?
I don't really think that they're afraid. Okay, you got to remember, where am I? I'm in Texas.
That's true.
A lot of people are proud to be conservative.
Not in college campuses, though. The most aggressive people. Yeah, I mean, we've had people run up and scream in my face at especially in Austin. Oh my God.
Oh well, no. My mom always says Austin is the Republic. I'm sorry.
What she says? What?
It's just really funny. She's like, it's the People's Republic of Austin. I can't remember it. It's actually really funny.
My grandfather would say that if God were to give Texas an enema, he'd stick the hose in Austin.
Oh my gosh.
But I like Austin. I like Austin. I think people that are actually relatively conservative, they just they just want to smoke a lot of pot. So people think it's a very liberal city. And I will say that surprise.
You want to smoke pot doesn't mean you're a liberal.
No, but I'm saying that's this perception in Austin. If you look, they want their business taxes low. They still want to benefit from the Texas economy. They want to have their right to own their guns. They just want to smoke pot and go swim nude at Hippie Hollow. That's a lot of people in Austin. But it surprised me that on campus across all of Texas or Oklahoma or a lot of conservative states, once you get on campus, it still is an enclave of very often one point of view expressed. I mean, let me ask you this. You saw obviously some of the screaming protesters there, and it was balanced. There were quite a few people who were actually happy to see this approach and enjoy this sort of Change My Mind segment. But can you think of any instant where there were conservatives having that same kind of visceral, screeching reaction to a liberal speaker on campus? Because I cover news day in and day out. I never see it.
So it's not necessarily like they were like screeching and awful. But while I was waiting before you know, and I don't I don't support anything like the fella who was like interrupting you. That's not cool.
I mean, call me a
No.
Nazi, yeah, but you know,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
one of
that's not
those.
cool.
I'm one of those
He
Israel supporting Nazis, yeah.
I watched some. I couldn't even finish watching it just because it didn't make sense to me. But I mean beforehand, like I think it felt like a bombardment because like I was on the other side. I felt like it was almost divided. Like there was like one side that I was standing on, but once I walked over to the other side, um, I kind of made a comment, and then I had three different guys start, you know, kind of making their own side comments, and I guess you know they weren't screaming. They were being very calm. They were actually very calm, and I wish I could have gotten to speak to them a little bit more. And at that time, I was realizing I was allowing myself to let my emotions get in the way rather than listen to what they were saying. So there's not always going to be that screeching conservative or even liberal, but
No, I
I think they
disagree.
exist
There's
on both
always one of those
sides.
liberals. There's always, at every camp, there's
Oh,
always
well,
one. I think it's far more rare to find the screeching conservative because they just want to let people speak. But there's always
yeah.
the leftist screaming that we're a Nazi.
I guess it depends where you find them, because like I've I've been like, if you ever drive past some of those abortion clinics, like they'll scream some really, really mean stuff to you, even if you're just like there to get a pap smear. Like,
Ugh, I hate that word, but that's just my male privilege. It's just a really pap smear. It's like it feels like something that one would do with a bagel. Only you take the bagel and go, oh, I'm never getting a bagel here again. But
sorry.
Here's actually final question on this. You said that you rethought kind of some of your stances and what you, I guess, sort of the justifications for abortion. We don't need to get into that. This doesn't need to be an argument at all. But
No.
let me ask you this. The kind of approach that was taken here, would you say that it got you to at least think more and consider an opposing viewpoint, more so than, let's say, one of those people who just have a poster with chopped up baby parts?
Yes.
Okay.
It definitely it will impact you a lot more. And you know, those same people who are standing out there by the post, I kind of compare them to the same people who have the anonymity of in the internet. You can say all you want about how fat I am. You can say that I'm a murderer, that I'm ill-educated, that I don't know anything, because I don't. Like I'm still learning, and um, I think that at the end of the day, you know, if you want to get your point across, you know, respect and kindness is going to get way further. You attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
So, you know,
The problem is I'm allergic to bees.
gonna,
So
oh,
then it just ends up
flies.
being the last scene from My
I see.
Girl, and no one likes that. It ends up being actually very tragic. No, I agree with you. By the way, there are plenty of people who do. Stand outside of abortion clinics who say, "Hey, listen, we can provide you with an ultrasound. Hey, listen, we can provide you with
Yeah,
some access to services that could
yeah,
help you with jobs." But so I do want to make sure that we differentiate between them. But yeah, I've been
yeah.
accused of not being pro-life enough because I've said, listen, man, I don't think the chopped up baby parts outside of a town square where people are even just having lunch with their kids is, A,
Yeah.
I don't think it's appropriate, and I'm as pro-life as they come, and B, I don't think it's effective. So I've been accused by people further on that side of
Yeah.
denying the truth, and I don't. I probably agree with all of their views on where life begins. I just don't agree with the method in trying to reach people.
Convey the message. Like,
Right.
and, you know, one of the things though that also was resonating with me was the amount of support and positivity that I also saw. And it's really something to think about. For every million of positive, let's say, comments,
Mm-hmm.
for every million positive comments, that one harsh negative comment will completely outshine the rest.
It is. It'll ruin your day.
And that's something that people need to remember while you're typing up those words. I want you to think about saying those same words to your daughter or to someone that you love. And could you ever say those words out loud to someone that you love? Because if you can't, maybe you should rephrase yourself. And then if you're okay with saying those kinds of things, I think we should sit down and we should talk to a counselor because you have some issues.
I need to talk with a counselor because the way my brother and I speak to each other and people hearing this is just awful. Thank God there's no transcript out there.
That's different.
Yeah, we just rib each other. Well, listen, first off, is there anything else that you would like to leave in closing for people who are watching this? I will say this before you make any statement. I know that you said you were really nervous and that this went out to the world and it was a big platform. Listen, I think a lot of people obviously disagree with you, and I think realistically there are a certain amount of people who are going to have a negative impression of you. But I will say this: being the first person to do this and how you've handled yourself today, there are far more people out there. By the way, same people who still disagree with your decision, who have respect for how you've conducted yourself and your willingness to engage. Far more than there are people who despise you. So I want you to know that, regardless of the comments you read. So remember that when you read a negative comment. But is there anything that you would like to leave people with in regards to how they kind of perceive you?
Well, essentially, if you feel like you are questioning your self-worth and you've gone through this same thing, you guys have my Twitter handle. You can feel free to DM me.
What is the Twitter handle? Can you say it again for?
It's going to be Yara Marie 3. That's Twitter.
Yara Marie 3.
Yes, I am an artist, so if you do want to check out some of my art, it's Yara Marie 123 on Instagram. But I want to encourage women, if you're questioning your self-worth and your value, please, you can reach out to me. You can talk to me. I can't judge you, obviously. Right. Or you can reach out to ones close to you, but don't do it alone. Don't feel like you're alone. There's so many people out there. And like you said, there's so many positive people who may not agree with what I said, but they're still very positive and they outshine a lot of the rest. Yeah. I am going to continue to study. Hopefully I can, keep my career going. Still trying to figure out what I'm trying to do with my life.
That's normal for your age. A lot of people don't know. It's terrible in Quebec where you graduate high school. I graduated a year early. I was 16. People graduate at 17, and you basically have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life by the time you're 14 if you want to get into advanced science. Imagine that, figuring out your life at 14. It's ridiculous.
So much pressure.
Yeah, don't put pressure on yourself for that. I would say put pressure on yourself to examine your positions, why you believe what you believe. Put pressure on yourself to do the right thing, but don't put pressure on yourself to have life completely figured out at this point.
Oh yeah.
Final question, and then a statement. If you could do it over again, would you still do it to change my mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd still do it.
Good.
I'm probably tell myself, girl, stop getting so personal. Stop using I.
That's okay.
That's something that I made a mistake with.
It's okay, though. I appreciate how authentic you were. And you know what? In parting, if ever you would like to host an event or where you interview me, maybe at your campus, and talk about the fallout and your experience, we usually don't have a lot of time to do this, and we only visit 2 campuses per year. But because of the respect you've shown me, I would love to do that with you at some point as a follow-up. I really appreciate you taking the time, Yara. Thank you so much. Okay, if you like this video, you watch videos on YouTube. If I were Jimmy Kimmel, if I were Stephen Colbert, or Trevor Noah, I would tell you to subscribe. But I have no corporate overlords who demand that I do this demeaning promo. I do the demeaning promo because I choose to. Subscribe or hit the notification bell because I need you. I need you. Please do it.